The Scorpio moon in a man's chart is one of the most complicated moon placements that one can have. When I say complicated, I don't necessarily mean negative or challenging, but of course, a Scorpio moon man has gone through many, many life and death experiences, and I don't say that lightly. I do not say that lightly. He has been pushed and tested to his limits again and again. Like, he's a true warrior. He's a warrior archetype. And he cannot be compared with any other placement. He is one of a kind. There is no man that can compete with him and his depth, his soul, the fire and the water within him. He is in his own lane, and there's no one that stands a chance against him. Now, I feel very protective over, of course, a Scorpio moon, because your girl's got a Scorpio moon. But I really ride so hard for this moon sign, especially men who have this moon sign, because I understand, even though I'm a female with a Scorpio moon, I still have that ability to understand how chaotic it can be to have the moon in Scorpio as a man, because having the moon as a Scorpio woman and having the moon in Scorpio as a man, they're two different manifestations. It's much more easier to have the moon in Scorpio as a woman as opposed to having the moon in Scorpio as a man, and that's because of the obvious. Women are encouraged to, you know, feel your heart out, feel your emotions, whereas men are not. And men have been raised and wired to strictly focus on logic and what makes sense, but sometimes emotions don't make sense. They can be so chaotic. They can be all over the place. There's a deep ocean of emotions when it comes to the moon in Scorpio, and there's just so many depths and layers, and the nature of a Scorpio moon's emotions are so complex, like they don't make any sense. And men have been also raised to focus on things that bring results, focus on things that are productive, focus on things that are resourceful, and emotions is not one of them. But as a society, if you look around, especially when you go on social media, the more we're evolving, the more people are having these open discussions and conversations, especially men, when it comes to their emotions. But I feel like in the front line should be the Scorpio moon man, because can anyone else other than a Scorpio moon man really talk about emotions? Because that's his element. You know, there's men out there with like podcasts and what have you that be talking about emotions and stuff and be talking about how to navigate through them and this, that, the other. But like, they've never gone to the underworld the way a Scorpio moon man has. They have never gone through the emotions and experiences and the trials and tribulations the same way a Scorpio moon man has. And the thing is, when a Scorpio moon man has done that shadow work, done that healing, has really evolved, and that spiritual, karmic, emotional healing definitely happens much more later in life. But once he's done a lot of that work, he's in a position of being just a master of healing and understanding how the psyche, the emotions, the mind, body, soul, and spirit, how they work. Like, I mean, of course, this man, the Scorpio moon man, is Pluto incarnated, a version, an aspect, a soul essence of Pluto, his energy, Hades. But there's many versions of Hades and Pluto too. There's a negative version, there's a positive version, and there's many myths around Hades. There's a negative myth where he abducted her and he forced her into the underworld, and then it gets darker and deeper. But there's also the positive version of Hades where he actually awakened Persephone to her true essence, to her divinity, her dark feminine, and she happily went to the underworld with him because that's where she wanted to be. That's where she wanted to stay and dive into the darkness and dive into the many different layers of magic. It wasn't because she was forced to go with him. But you see, the positive version is less heard of. There's a lot of focus on the darkness. And why? Because there's much darkness to explore. There's much darkness to heal and transmute and transform. But ultimately, he is the embodiment of Pluto, of Hades. It's up to him, depending on his awareness, his consciousness, his soul frequency as well, because not everyone has the same soul frequency or even the same soul mission purpose. It's up to him. What embodiment does he want to be? What I do find, though, is those men that end up as the negative aspect of Hades, the negative version of him, they're completely unaware. and they are operating from their unconscious. Another energy that is actually associated with the Scorpio moon is diving into the unconscious, not the subconscious, the unconscious. And that is very difficult to do. Most people don't do that. They can't do it. They don't have access to that. They don't have access to the hidden, to the world that doesn't exist to them. They can't even see it or feel it or hear it. They're not even aware of it. But for a Scorpio moon, like, you are very aware of the unconscious, except when your darkest fears or darkest traumas or wounds or the darkness within you has possessed you, and then you're totally under the influence of the darkness. And that's when you don't have access to your unconscious. That's when you don't have access of doing that real deep soul healing. But from his highest expression, I mean, this man has just so much depth and substance and just so much magic and potency. Like, so much. And if only he could really see his greatness and feel it to his true potential, because sometimes men with a moon in Scorpio, depending on how that moon is aspected, of course, because aspects really make your moon more personal. So that's why not every Scorpio moon is going to experience the Scorpio moon the same way. Some people will have an easier ride. Some people will have a much difficult ride. If you have positive aspects to your Scorpio moon, you're going to have a much more stable moon. Whereas if you don't have positive aspects, it's going to be a lot of tests and trials and tribulations. There's going to be a lot of karma to deal with, a lot of back and forth, and that's where the challenges kick in. But ultimately, they're there for a reason, because there's something to learn, something to heal, something to transform. You know how it goes, right? The reason it can be difficult or challenging is because a moon here can feel in the dark. The moon in Scorpio, especially for a man, he can feel like he's in the dark. First of all, the moon doesn't enjoy being in Scorpio. The reason why it doesn't enjoy, because the moon wants to do freaking love light BS, okay? It wants to be in Taurus, or it wants to be in Cancer, and it wants to be comfortable. But here comes the Scorpio energy, and it drags the moon into the darkness, into the underworld, and reveals the shadows, the secrets, the hidden, all the things, like the kind of worms, all the parasites, all the karmic energy that has been just buried from lifetime and lifetime, and it reveals it. And the moon is what is threatened and intimidated and afraid of the Scorpio energy. So that's why when the moon is in Scorpio, it can be a challenge, and that's why it's known to be in its full position. But to be honest, those that have the moon in Scorpio have the ability to do shadow work, soul work in such an advanced way, and they can do so much karmic healing and understand the depths of it like no other placement. Like no other placement. So whenever I've been in a conversation and this person has been like a non-Scorpio Luna man, and they're talking about like karma and healing and da-da-da, I'm like, you have really no idea. Like, yeah, maybe you have your moon in the 8th house, or, you know, your moon conjunct Pluto, or other aspects like that. But the moon in Scorpio, like, this is the element for true soul healing, true karmic ancestral work. Like, this is a spiritual exorcist. The spiritual exorcist. And I feel like it's very easy for women to fit into that role and work with spirituality and healing, because it comes a little more naturally. But so does it for a man, although the restriction here can be, how do I surrender to the moon without it dragging me into the deep end of the ocean and me just drowning in there? That can be the challenge, because like I said at the beginning of this video, men are wired differently, and their brain works differently too. So they can feel like they're in a confrontation, an inner conflict with themselves, because do I listen to my head or my heart? Do I listen to my intellect or my intuition? Do I listen to my logic or my emotions? That's where it can be a challenge. And this takes a lot of time, a lot of years to fully understand and surrender to the moon without getting drowned into the deep end of the ocean and staying stuck there. It takes a lot of years to understand and hold and be patient with your moon and nurture it. And the more you work with it, the more you learn a little bit by bit for it. Although our learning style as Scorpio Lunas is not learning bit by bit. Like, we want to learn it all in one go. Like, we just want to just dive right in. But sometimes there's a lot to process. Like, for me to get where I am in my spiritual journey, it didn't happen overnight. It's been happening since birth. Now, of course, there was a huge spiral that occurred in my life where, you know, I had a huge awakening that turned my life like upside down, and like a true Scorpio Luna, I went through life and death, and I don't say that lightly. I was on the edge of death. But what was happening for me was the old me, the old aspects to me, or the energies that weren't serving me, or the programming and the conditioning and the amnesia, that was all being transmuted out of my system so I could come online again, and so that I could regain my memories and awaken to my true self. And it didn't happen overnight. It can sound like it happened overnight. There was a lot of ups and downs, and that's the Scorpio moon energy. You know, we are faced with life and death in different forms. And we constantly go through that rebirth, the constant awakening to new aspects of ourself, awakening to new truths, awakening to new energies, and just regaining memories. That stuff happens to us all the time. That's why many of us have deja vu when we travel, or why we have very strong psychic dreams, because those ancestors, those guides, they're communicating. Your higher self, your past self, your future self, they're all communicating with you. That is why you feel the veil and it's thin around you. And that's why you can feel energy so much more easily, because you have that access. But today I just wanted to show some love to the Scorpio Lunas. I haven't been posting much, but here we go, okay? Well, let's kick off with the most sexiest moon sign, the most deep, magical, potent moon sign for a man, the moon in Scorpio. I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to hear from you, Scorpio Luna men. Comment down below. Let me know your experiences, how you feel, how's your day going. I want to hear from you, okay? And I'll take time out of my day to reply back, and trust me, I receive what you say. And I'm always sending you just so much love from one Scorpio moon to another. So with that being said, I'll see you soon.